Do you ever get a fine so ridiculous you wonder if the sender was drunk, delusional, or just bored with her power? That's exactly what happened the morning I opened a certified envelope from the Maple Rock Estates HOA and found a $6,000 0-cent citation for endangering wildlife. No warning, no conversation, just a financial gut punch wrapped in legalese and self-righteousness. And who delivered this ticket to my door like it was a federal indictment? Claudia Penrose, queen of the sidewalk tattletales, standing there like she'd just sentenced me at The Hague. But what she didn't know was that little piece of paper set off a chain of events that would leave the entire HOA in tears. Leave a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. And if you love fascinating stories like this one, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow we've got another incredible story coming your way, and trust me, there are some jaw-dropping surprises waiting for you in the next parts. You're not going to want to miss a single twist. If you're watching this while dodging your HOA's monthly mandatory meeting that feels more like a hostage negotiation with stale cookies instead of duct tape, then friend, you've found the right corner of the internet. Buckle up. Because this isn't just a story about a $6,000 0-cents fine. It's about the day a pastel-wrapped dictator named Claudia Penrose tried to fine me for hunting on land I didn't just have permission to use, I would soon own. And like most HOA disasters, it all started with a woman, a clipboard, and a god complex. Claudia strutted up my porch with that fine like it was the Last Judgment, handed it over like she was Moses, and said, "We take wildlife protection very seriously in Maple Rock." Ma'am, I didn't run over a panda. I shot a deer, legally, with written permission. But logic don't mean much when you're dealing with someone who thinks bylaws beat the Bill of Rights. Name's Grant Delaney, retired Army, former federal code analyst, and currently a man who was just trying to enjoy the quiet life, until a glorified lawn committee declared war. I bought this house at the edge of Maple Rock Estates because it backed up to real forest, not just hedges trimmed like topiary poodles. Peaceful, perfect, and supposedly HOA adjacent, not HOA enslaved. I hunt. It's not a phase. It's what my grandfather taught me. And the woods behind the neighborhood? They belong to an 82-year-old man named Hank Truby, who now lives in Florida and was kind enough to grant me written permission to hunt on his land. "Take a good shot," he wrote. "Send me a photo if it's a beauty." I did exactly that. And that's when Claudia found out her secret kingdom wasn't hers at all. 3 days after the hunt, I found an envelope taped to my door like a ransom note for sanity. HOA violation, $6,000, 0 cents. Disturbing community peace and harming wildlife. Attached was a map, one that drew a little too confidently around land that didn't belong to the HOA. That's when I started digging. Like, real digging. The kind that involves county records, plat maps, and that specific shade of rage that only a clipboard queen can trigger. Turns out, Claudia's kingdom of trails and bird feeders was sitting on Hank Truby's land. Land the HOA had never legally touched, never maintained in any proper way, and absolutely had no right to fine me over. They'd basically built a fantasy trail system on borrowed dirt, and now they were trying to punish me for breaking their illusion. What Claudia didn't understand, what most HOA bullies never understand, is that not everyone folds when faced with a printed threat. Some of us read the fine print, highlighted in 3 colors, and asked follow-up questions. This wasn't about deer, or noise, or even me anymore. It was about the way power corrupts people who've never earned it. And now that I knew the truth, I wasn't about to let Claudia and her HOA cronies guilt-trip the neighborhood into submission. No, this wasn't going to end with me paying a fine. It was going to end with Claudia learning that property law, unlike HOA newsletters, actually means something, and that when you try to shame a soldier over legal land use, you better be holding more than a laminated badge and a bad attitude. You ever see someone march into a moment they think they're controlling, only to find out they've just walked into their own undoing? That's what happened the morning Evelyn Prescott, Maple Ridge HOA president and reigning monarch of passive-aggressive wellness, stormed into a forest clearing in neon running shoes and a moral superiority complex. only to find me, Mason Holloway, elbow deep in a field-dressed buck. I swear, the woman looked like she'd stumbled into the last season of Yellowstone and someone forgot to hand her the script. She gasped like I'd shot a unicorn mid-Pallades. It had been a perfect morning. Cold air, soft light, and nothing but forest around me. I'd been sitting in that clearing since dawn, hunting on land I had written permission to use from its rightful owner, Hank Garrison, a retired farmer in Florida who'd told me to respect the land and send a photo if I got a beauty. I'd done exactly that. An 8-point buck, clean shot, quick drop, everything legal, everything peaceful. Until suddenly, out of the brush, came a stampede of coordinated chaos. Evelyn, in full pastel glory, followed by 5 HOA fitness fanatics dressed like they'd just escaped a Lululemon catalog. Evelyn stopped dead in her tracks when she saw me. She blinked once, then again, like her contact lenses were trying to reject the scene. "What? What is this?" she shrieked, clutching her water bottle like it might double as pepper spray. One of her posse let out a high-pitched squeal and covered her mouth like she'd just witnessed a live execution. "This is protected land," Evelyn barked. "A community wellness zone. You can't just kill things here." I stood up slowly, calmly wiped my hands, and reached into my pack for a copy of Hank's signed permission letter. "Ma'am," I said, handing it to her, "this is private property. Hank Garrison owns it, and I have written permission to be here." Evelyn didn't even glance at the paper. She waved it off like a mosquito. "That land belongs to Maple Ridge Trails. I've been maintaining it for over a decade." There it was. The delusion. That uncanny HOA ability to confuse routine with ownership. They'd been walking those trails for years, laying down benches, throwing up bird feeders, planting little signs that said things like, "Breathe deeply," and "Peace lives here." But none of it made it theirs. It was like decorating a hotel room and then suing the manager for walking in. I explained again, calmly, that the land was never HOA property. Evelyn, now red in the face, called over one of her crew. "Call the sheriff," she hissed. "Tell them there's a man with a weapon threatening the integrity of our shared spaces." Integrity. That's the word she used. Meanwhile, another woman was taking pictures of me like I was Bigfoot. I almost smiled, because this wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be a lesson. The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later. Deputy Carmen Brooks, who'd known Hank for years and didn't love being dragged into HOA drama on a Saturday. I handed her the same permission letter. She read it, called Hank, got the story, and then turned to Evelyn. "Ma'am," she said, in that perfect blend of politeness and finality, "this is private property. Mr. Holloway is acting within his legal rights." Evelyn looked like she'd been served a salad with ranch dressing instead of vinaigrette. "But this land has been used by the community for years. We've enhanced it, maintained it." "That doesn't change ownership," Deputy Brooks said. "You'll need to speak with the county if you have concerns." Evelyn was stunned silent, a rare moment I considered framing. But 3 days later, the silence ended. Taped to my front door like a bad joke was an official-looking envelope from the Maple Ridge Estates HOA. Inside, a $6,000 0-cent fine for community endangerment, emotional distress to residents, and, on a favorite, unauthorized activity on HOA trail systems. It was written like a cease and desist letter from someone who just discovered the concept of power and got drunk on it. I laughed, then filed it. Not because it wasn't serious, but because Evelyn, had no idea what I was about to do next. What she'd done wasn't just overreach. It was fiction dressed up as policy. And I'd spent enough time in federal analysis to know fiction leaves a paper trail. Still with me? You should be, because in the next part, I don't just push back. I walk into the next HOA meeting with maps, legal codes, and something better than outrage receipts. And when I pull out what I found in the county records office, Evelyn's empire of cardio trails and unearned confidence, it starts to crack. Leave a comment below to let me know where you're watching from And if HOA power trips like this make your blood boil just right, smash that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode, we go from forest drama to legal firepower. And Evelyn's not ready for what's coming. You ever walk into a room knowing you're outnumbered, outgunned, and absolutely unbothered? That's how I felt walking into the Maple Ridge HOA tribunal, meeting, with a folder under my arm and calm in my stride. The chairs were arranged like we were in a courtroom drama, and I had apparently been cast as the defendant. Claudia sat at the head of the table like Judge Judy, with a superiority complex. Marcus sat beside her, looking like he'd spent the last 48 hours memorizing HOA bylaws and Yelp reviews about tree trimming. A few neighbors were present, arms crossed, faces tight with suspicion. I took a seat near the back, the kind that says, "I'm not here to beg, I'm here to correct the record." Claudia opened with a performance that could have earned her a daytime Emmy. "Mr. Holloway," she announced, "has endangered our shared spaces and violated the sanctity of our wellness trails. His behavior, while perhaps legal, is not in line with the community's standards we hold dear." Standards. That word again. She tossed it around like it was a substitute for the law. Marcus chimed in with a well-rehearsed line about preserving tranquility and long-standing communal stewardship, which sounded less like English and more like the back of a Whole Foods bag. When they finished their opening arguments, minus the gavel, I stood up, opened my folder, and began the quiet dismantling of their illusion. First, I placed my valid hunting license on the table, then the email from Hank, signed and dated, giving me written permission to hunt on his property. Next came the county plat map with parcel 147B clearly marked, owned by Hank Garrison, not the HOA. "This land," I said, pointing to the map, "is private. Hank owns it. I was on it with his full permission. The HOA has no authority there, no easement, and certainly no right to issue fines." For a second, the room was still. Even Claudia blinked. Marcus leaned over to study the map like it had just started glowing. Then Claudia leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and smiled. The kind of smile you see right before someone reaches for a technicality. "That may be," she said slowly, "but the HOA has used that land openly and consistently for over 10 years. We've maintained the trails, installed amenities, and hosted wellness events. That creates a legitimate claim under adverse possession." She said it like it was her ace card, as if saying the phrase adverse possession would end the debate. I raised an eyebrow. "So, your defense is that you've been using someone else's land without permission for so long that you deserve to keep it?" That got a chuckle from one of the neighbors. Claudia didn't flinch. "Yes," she said. "The land has become part of our community through usage." Marcus nodded solemnly, as if this was some kind of sacred doctrine passed down through generations of entitled joggers. But that night, something unexpected happened. I got a call from Hank. His voice was tired, quieter than before. "Mason," he said, "I'm getting old. My knees are shot, and the taxes on that land just keep climbing. I never thought it'd cause this kind of drama." I asked him, gently, if he'd ever considered selling it. There was a pause. "You'd be interested?" he asked. I said I would. Seriously. We talked for over an hour. He said the land had been in his family for decades, but now just sat there, unvisited, unappreciated. "If someone who respects it wants to buy it," he said, "I'd rather sell than have it used without my say-so." A week later, we quietly finalized the deal. 85 acres of prime forest land, surveyed, signed, and transferred. I didn't just have permission anymore, I had ownership. Still with me? Because the next morning, Claudia showed up at my front porch, flanked by Marcus and a local real estate attorney. She came ready for battle. What she didn't know was that I'd already won the war. She came with a threat. I came with a deed. And what happened in that living room? Let's just say It was the first time I saw Claudia blink more than once in a sentence. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from, and if watching a homeowner turn the tables on HOA tyranny gives you life, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow, I hand Claudia the paperwork, and she finally realizes the empire she built wasn't just fragile, it was never hers to begin with. You ever stumble on a lie so big, so dumb, and so public it's almost impressive? That was me, sitting at my kitchen table, flipping through a glossy brochure titled Maple Ridge Nature Reserve, A Vision for Wellness. The cover had a photo of Claudia Penrose, posing next to a tulip garden like she was about to accept a Nobel Prize in landscaping. Inside were renderings of walking trails, yoga platforms, birdwatching decks, and, no kidding, a reflection pond named in honor of community leadership. All of it was beautiful, and all of it was supposed to be built on land she didn't own. Land I now did. She'd built her park dreams on Hank Garrison's dirt, like a house of cards, and I'd just bought the table. The brochure wasn't the only thing. Turns out, Claudia had been busy. Grant applications, city permit filings, donation drives, the whole nine. A special fund had been quietly added to the HOA's annual budget under the line item Community Environmental Enhancement. Subtle, innocent. Except that fund had already pulled in over $75,000, 0 cents from residents over the past 3 years. There were bake sales, silent auctions, even a Walk for Wellness 10K where participants received custom towels with the park's name embroidered across them. Claudia Penrose Nature Reserve. The woman had literally named a public park after herself, on land she didn't own with money that didn't belong to her, for a project that didn't exist. Bold doesn't even cover it. That's ego in full bloom. I wouldn't have even known about the brochure if it weren't for Denise Yates, the HOA board secretary, and, unbeknownst to Claudia, a woman with both a spine and a conscience. Denise had been silent at most meetings, the type who always looked like she was calculating mortgage rates in her head. But after I showed up with the deed, something shifted. She called me that night, nervous but determined. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "I think you should see something." We met at a diner 2 towns over, like it was a Cold War drop site. She brought a manila folder filled with emails, budget memos, and internal board notes. The fund was real, the plans were elaborate, and the money? Well, that's where it got extra slimy. Penrose Dine Group, the firm listed on all the park planning materials, wasn't just any contractor. It was run by Claudia's brother-in-law and the project manager on the permit paperwork. Marcus' wife under her maiden name. No competitive bidding, no disclosure to the residents, just thousands of dollars siphoned into a feel-good project that conveniently funneled HOA cash into Claudia's extended family tree. It wasn't just a conflict of interest, it was textbook fraud. They planted lies like bird feeders and hoped no one looked at the receipts, and for years, no one had. But I wasn't just anyone, and thanks to Hank, I now owned the very land they were pretending to protect. I brought all of it to Tara Vaughn, a real estate attorney who used to specialize in municipal corruption cases. She reviewed the documents, eyebrows climbing higher with each page. "This isn't just an overstep," she said. "It's organized misappropriation of HOA funds. They filed permits, solicited donations, and funneled money into private entities on land they didn't even control. That's not just embarrassing, that's actionable." She helped me organize everything into a clean legal packet. Timeline, ownership documents, financial records, whistleblower statements, and every glossy page of Claudia's fantasy park plan. We didn't just have smoke, we had fire, kindling, and gasoline. And the HOA board? It was starting to feel the heat. Word started leaking. Richard? The HOA treasurer. Suddenly looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. I overheard him at the grocery store muttering something about exposure and fiduciary liability. Denise stopped attending meetings entirely, and Marcus? He avoided me like I was contagious. You could see the cracks forming. For the first time, Claudia's iron grip on the board felt loose. like the queen bee had gotten too greedy and the hive was starting to buzz. I didn't confront her, not yet. Because when you're holding a bombshell, you don't shout, you drop it. Still with me? Good. Because in the next part, we walk into the HOA's next general meeting. And I bring the packet, the deed, the documents, and I ask one question that turns Claudia's castle into a sandcastle. Leave a comment below to let me know where you're watching from, and if watching the mighty fall by their own bad paperwork gives you life, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow, I show up with the receipt, and Claudia, she won't be able to yoga her way out of this one. You ever see someone realize, right in front of a live audience, that the crown they've been polishing for years is actually made of plastic? That's what happened the night Claudia Penrose walked into the Maple Ridge Community Center wearing her signature blazer, clutching a folder of talking points and expecting a standing ovation. What she got instead was a full house of ticked-off neighbors, a microphone that wouldn't obey her, and a man in the front row. Me holding a folder thicker than her HOA rulebook. She thought she was about to deliver a unity speech. What she didn't know was that her HOA cruise ship was about to hit an iceberg shaped like a deed. Claudia opened the meeting with her usual syrupy tone. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she said, hands clasped like she was announcing a bake sale, not facing a mutiny. "There have been some rumors circulating about our wellness trail project. I want to clarify. This park is about community health, beauty, and belonging." A few polite nods, but the energy in the room felt tight. The kind of tension you get when people are smiling because they're hoping dessert is served before the shouting starts. I let her speak. I let Marcus mumble through his usual jargon about shared vision and historic trail use. And then I stood up, walked to the front, and said, "Would the board kindly allow me a few minutes to present evidence?" I laid it out like a slow-motion demolition. First, the deed proof that the land Claudia's dream park was built on belonged to me. Then the email from Hank Garrison giving me full permission to hunt and access his property before I ever bought it. Then the county maps, highlighting the property lines the HOA had conveniently ignored for a decade. But I wasn't done. Out came the financial documents, the paper trail of $75,000, 0 cents in HOA funds funneled into a so-called non-profit project. I showed how it traced through Penrose Design Group, owned by Claudia's brother-in-law. And the icing? A stack of trail cam photos showing Marcus and 2 board members ripping down my no trespassing signs in the dead of night. The room went still. You could hear the collective realization land like a dropped wine glass. Claudia stood up, all tight posture and corporate composure, like she was going to pivot. "This is all being taken out of context," she said, voice climbing an octave. "These trails have always been maintained by the community. Our vision is bigger than one man with a map." She pivoted to her favorite phrase, community unity. That's when the doors at the back opened and 2 people walked in. Not residents, not reporters. Detective Alicia Monroe from the County Fraud Division and Deputy DA Carter Bowen, who looked like he hadn't blinked in 20 minutes. They nodded at me, then turned to Claudia. "Mrs. Penrose," Detective Monroe said, her voice calm and clear. "We've reviewed the financial documents provided by Mr. Holloway and obtained additional records from the HOA treasurer." Claudia blinked. Marcus turned pale. "At this time, we're initiating a formal investigation into misuse of community funds, permit fraud, and potential conflict of interest violations." Claudia's mouth moved, but no sound came out. For a woman who usually spoke in paragraphs, silence looked foreign on her. Someone in the back gasped. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching the ship go down. That's when the tantrum hit. Claudia slammed her folder on the table, shouted something about slander and ungrateful neighbors, and declared she was the only reason this community had flowers, fitness classes, or a functioning mailbox system. Her voice echoed off the walls like a toddler's meltdown in a marble hallway. A few residents looked away, others just stared. shocked. "You wouldn't have this neighborhood without me," she shrieked, fingers shaking toward the crowd. And just like that, the room turned. Sarah Jameson, who donated $500.00 to the trail fund, stood up and said, "You used our money to name a park after yourself on land you didn't own. That's not leadership, that's theft." The applause started small, then grew. A neighbor I barely knew patted me on the shoulder. Marcus slipped out the side door. The board? It unraveled in real time. Still with me? Good. Because if you thought that was the end, Claudia wasn't done yet. That night as I sat on my porch, I got a tip from Denise. Claudia had started texting neighbors, calling for a trail reclamation walk. Her final move? A mass trespass on land she no longer controlled. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from, and if poetic justice tastes as sweet to you as it does to me, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's part. Claudia crosses the line, literally, and this time the sheriff's office is already waiting. You ever see someone show up to a crime scene that they planned, in activewear and a megaphone? That was Claudia Prescott, standing at the edge of my land, flanked by a handful of die-hard HOA loyalists and a lawn flag that read, "Take back our trails." It looked less like civil disobedience and more like a walking club that had lost its GPS signal and its grip on reality. After losing the board, the respect of the neighborhood, and any legal footing she had left, Claudia decided to go out with one last performance. She called it the Trail Freedom Walk, a mass trespass on property she used to control by rumor and recycling emails. What she didn't count on was that I'd already upgraded from annoyed homeowner to certified conservation steward. With help from Tessa Vaughn, my lawyer who could have moonlighted as a tactical strategist, we had quietly filed to have all 85 acres of the land designated as a protected conservation zone. That meant new boundaries, new enforcement protections, and brand new signs: conservation area, no unauthorized access. Violators will be prosecuted. We posted cameras along the main paths and even installed a tasteful iron gate at the most trafficked trailhead. Not to be dramatic, but if Claudia wanted her big showdown, we were ready to host it like a courtroom with trees. And yes, everything was filed, stamped, and triple notarized. She tried to break me with fines. I broke her fraud ring with a fence. Saturday morning came, and right on cue, Claudia arrived like she was leading the HOA version of the March on Washington. Microphone, camera crew, branded flyers, and Marcus trailing her like a confused substitute teacher. "We walk today to reclaim what's ours," she shouted into the mic, ignoring the giant metal sign behind her that literally said it wasn't. A few folks from the neighborhood showed up too, but their expressions said they weren't there to follow. They were there to watch. They wanted to see how far she'd go. Turns out, not very far. Because just as Claudia gave the signal to march past the iron gate, 3 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing, doors swinging open. Detective Alicia Monroe stepped out like she'd been waiting for this day since kindergarten. "Good morning, Mrs. Prescott," she called out. "Before you or your group proceed any further, I need to advise you this is protected conservation land, and entering beyond this point without permission will result in arrest for trespassing and interference with environmental protections." Claudia froze. You could almost see the gears grinding in her brain, trying to calculate the odds of turning this into a martyr moment. But this wasn't drama class, this was criminal liability. A few of her freedom hikers peeled off immediately, muttering about not being told there'd be police. Others followed. Marcus tried to act invisible. And Claudia? She screamed. Not just a yell, a full-body, guttural mic feedback tantrum that echoed through the trees like an angry squirrel with a wireless amp. I filmed from a respectful distance, phone steady, hands calm. Not to mock, just to document. Because when you've been falsely fined, publicly smeared, and legally threatened by someone who thinks bylaws override the Bill of Rights, poetic justice deserves a highlight reel. The walk ended not with cheers, but with a slow, awkward retreat to the parking lot. Nobody was arrested, yet, but the message was clear. The HOA's grip had broken, and the new law of the land had real teeth. And sure enough, within days, charges were filed. Fraud, misappropriation of funds, permit falsification. Claudia, Marcus, and 2 other board members took plea deals to avoid a courtroom spectacle. They each got probation, restitution orders, and were barred from serving on any homeowner's board for 10 years. Now here's the best part. The $75,000, 0 cents they'd collected for Claudia's fantasy park? Once recovered, I worked with the county to donate it to a scholarship fund in Hank Garrison's name, focused on ethics and leadership. Felt fitting. Hank never asked for any of this. He just wanted someone to respect the land. And now his name would stand for something bigger than benches and bird feeders. As for Maple Ridge, the HOA was restructured under new leadership. Deb Green, retired school principal, all backbone and common sense, was elected president. She installed open financial reports, public voting, and banned clipboard-based citations altogether. First order of business? Establishing a real trail system, with real permits and real community input. I helped lay it out myself. We called it Hank's Way. A clean, winding path with a simple wooden sign and a plaque that reads, "Respect nature, respect truth, respect each other." No QR codes, no logo, just the quiet, steady reminder that community isn't something you rule, it's something you earn. And Claudia? Last I heard, she sold her house, changed her email, and moved to a condo complex where someone else handles the rules. The HOA lost their grip. But we found something better, neighbors who don't need a rule book to do what's right. And me? I still walk those woods. Sometimes alone, sometimes with neighbors who once thought I was the villain. Funny how time, truth, and a clean deed can turn suspicion into community. The trail we built together, Hank's Way, isn't just a path through trees. It's a line in the dirt that says, respect matters, ownership matters, and you don't need a title or a clipboard to stand up for what's right. Just a spine, and maybe a good lawyer. Looking back, this wasn't a story about hunting, or even HOA politics. It was about power. Who takes it, who abuses it, and who earns it? Claudia built her little empire on intimidation and illusion. I tore it down with maps, patience, and facts. Because justice doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up quietly, on county paper with a signature, and the resolve of someone who refuses to be bullied. So if this story gave you something, a laugh, a little hope, or just the sweet sound of poetic justice finally arriving, do me a favor. Hit that like button so this story reaches more people who need it. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, especially if you've ever had a run-in with a clipboard tyrant. And subscribe to the channel, because next time, we've got a story where a lawn gnome, a hidden clause, and a grandma with binoculars start a war no one saw coming. Truth wins, paper trails matter, and sometimes the best revenge is a peaceful walk on a trail with your name on it. Thanks for listening. See you in the next story.